You don't use it as much as you think you will.
Yeah, we keep a boat there, so.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next is roll call. All members are present except Melissa, and Becky said she's running a few minutes late. Before we approve the agenda, I'd like to take a moment just to welcome Alan Wheeling, our newest board member to the table. You have any words you want to say, speech or anything?
Words of innocent speech.
Yeah. Okay, then
Welcome, Alan.
can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second,
There's no discussion, all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And I don't believe any comments from visitors? Nobody signed up? Okay, then we'll move on to board committees. The first is health and safety, and I do not have my notes, so Greg, step in if you will. One thing that was interesting, we talked about, we had an actual live tornado drill this spring. And an inopportune time, but everything went well with that drill, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Really well.
I mean,
Or-
yeah, all the kids were basically on the way to the bus, if not already on the bus. And everybody kind of did their thing and got the kids back in, and it was really good. There were a few things that we would change to, that we need to know that we need to have different in the end, but.
Is that mostly because some kids were already out of the building?
I would say, like, with all of the other doors being locked, we need to have, like, all the doors need to be back opened up so the kids in their cars can get back in the building.
Sure.
Things like that. Like,
Yep.
we had staff running to some of those doors, open them, but if we could just have them a button
Open.
push, which easily can be done.
Yep.
We just have to know to do that in the next,
Sure.
if something like that were to happen again, or in a drill to have the outside doors opened so kids can get back into the building. But I mean, besides kids being frightened, which I don't know if that would ever change in any circumstance like that, where the kids were out there, saw it coming, and then come back in. I thought it went really, really well. I was surprised.
Oh, and I just kept saying in the halls, just go to your safe places. You guys have been through this X number of years, and they knew where to go. And they just found a spot where they've been in the
Yeah,
past.
we were basically just telling them to go to the rooms without windows, because that's where our tornado safe places are.
Yeah.
Where, we had elementary kids all the way from the high school down to middle school.
Yeah.
And then
Not in their normal place.
Right.
normal
Yeah.
Yep.
tornado spots.
Yeah.
But it was actually, I thought went really well. We try, in all instances, we try to avoid circumstances like that when we do a real drill. Like, we don't do it, we try not to do it during lunch because that's chaotic, and we try not to do it during passing times. But it was nice to see that the kids were well enough trained to have an idea, to follow the other kids in front of them, and yeah.
I heard from some staff members who said they were very impressed with
Yeah.
the staff, and
Yeah.
everybody just stepped in and did what they were trained to do.
And we heard from the non-publics, I think, just for keeping their students safe that were on those buses and had to
I
come
suppose
up
they
and
were
come into
here.
our buildings because
Yeah.
they don't practice here. This isn't their shelter home. And then the other thing, I just want to commend the high school students and even some of the middle school students. What a great job they did, taking those younger ones, because with some of the kids had to go to the kind of come in the middle school door or the high school door, and that's not where they practice. They're elementary kids, and some of them were elementary non-public kids. But those students just took those little kids with them, and they just, took care of them, and then they made sure they got back on the bus or where they needed to be. So it went really well, and I was very pleased with the older students helping our younger students.
So our system worked, it sounds like. One other thing, we were notified by Stearns County that we are going to receive $8,000 to help pay for our repeater system in the school. We haven't received that yet.
Not yet, we're waiting for the check.
Repeaters,
mail.
that's radio.
Yeah, for that
Radio.
original thing.
A lot of the other stuff was housekeeping. I don't know if you have anything to add
No,
to that.
we just, every year we update the fob list of where we could put fobs to more secure the building, but other than that, pretty much end of the year meeting.
Okay, then staff.
I also did not bring my notes, so you'll be receiving an email. because I can't remember. It was way at the end of May, so I forgot to grab my notes.
Okay, then buildings and grounds. We met with Greg and Stephanie and just went through a list of projects that are on the foreseeable future, next summer, the small projects, and then all the way up to some of the pool and locker rooms, that type of thing. And just kind of went through the system that Greg has always used for our information moving forward to next year. We'll be revisiting those again, probably fall. Prioritize. A lot, we use the LTFM funds for a bunch of those smaller projects. So that's where we'll have to prioritize and come up with a plan. Get it
Looks
going
like
for next time.
lights are getting replaced in this hallway. Is that true? Or were those already done? It looked like there was a cart of old lights sitting in the hallway.
That's been sitting there for 3 weeks.
So they must have come out of somewhere.
It moves around.
What?
I'm guessing it came out of the meeting.
Oh, yeah, those are the lights
Oh,
out
I
of the
bet,
windows,
okay.
just shuffling down here to get rid of them, throw them
Okay.
out the dumpsters.
That makes sense.
I
I
don't
thought
know.
maybe some got replaced somewhere.
You have anything to add, Jason or
We
Josh?
talked a very short time about fees and usage and didn't go anywhere with it, just discussion.
Building fees.
Yeah, Greg made up a very nice list of just projects that are coming up in the foreseeable future, and I don't know if anybody is interested, other board members are interested in seeing that list. I'm sure we
Yeah,
can
we'll share it out. I think I left a note for Dr. Dingman coming in to schedule a buildings and grounds meeting for next fall and to share that information out with the rest of the board.
Yep, some of the stuff is happening,
Yeah.
some of it's happening right now, and
Yep.
you know, some of it we got our eye on.
Greg, didn't you, because you had that one list that you shared, where it was, you know, current cost factor,
Mhm.
low cost, middle cost, high cost. Was that part of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
I accidentally shared it with you because I
Yeah, I was gonna
thought you were on the
say.
building ground committee.
I got it.
Wasn't top secret information. They just said, pull it out. Yes.
Well, I thought that was easy to understand that.
Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go on to administrative reports.
Yes, just got a few items. Youth Frontiers Respect retreats have been scheduled. One on the 11th of September and one on Halloween. And then we're still looking for an IT, industrial ed, career tech ed teacher. Just tough to find those individuals. So fingers crossed, something is gonna come to fruition over the course of the next couple of weeks. But I've been on the phone making calls to retired people, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see.
So has like nobody applied at all?
We've had a couple of applicants. One doesn't have licensure, the other one hasn't taught for 15 years probably, other than 1 year, tier 1, doing something out of field. So.
What is the protocol if we don't get someone?
We met today and we came up with some different scenarios today. I don't know if any of them are gonna come to fruition yet, but a lot of it's just hinging on a couple of people that we're currently pursuing, but there's some backup plans that we could possibly do. Deals with the union.
Hiring used to be fun. Used to. It's been challenging to find some spots, but cautiously optimistic.
I think there's only one program in the whole entire state, one university that provides that license.
Okay,
So it's difficult.
kind of a rare fitting position.
Yeah, there's some
So
tough
say you
positions.
could find a teacher who was very interested in getting licensed. Do you have to still attend that university to get licensed then?
No,
you do it-
I've reached out to a university in North Dakota and that they specialize in getting anybody licensed in any area.
Okay,
So they don't have to attend a campus, because that's
Okay.
what this place does. So
Right.
I reached out to them because they also provide this license on campus.
okay.
So I was calling to see, by the time I was calling, obviously every one of their kids that they were putting out was already taken.
Sure.
But, so then that's what they said, if we have someone that we need to get licensed, they're the place to go to make it easy on, well, not easy, but to make it easy on that
Feasible.
person's lifestyle
Okay. Yeah.
piece, so.
We just gotta find somebody that's passionate about,
Right,
area.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
and we can train and we can work with them regarding the tiered system that the state has, but it's just challenging. So Jason, if you're game, you know, you can change here, and, you know, probably a perfect fit.
Maybe all the school board members will be taking turns.
Take a turn.
It kinda looks like it could work.
Oh, it's too bad.
It's an area that that's so needed for kids too, for the workforce.
Especially for
Yeah.
this district, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And surrounding districts, for sure.
Okay, anything else, Chad?
Just, you know, these jobs are challenging at times. Just this time of year, I just really appreciate the support that all of you guys and gals provide. Thank you.
Did you say you were pursuing people that were out of, or in retirement, trying to
Yeah.
persuade them
Anybody
out?
we can think of.
I've got a few other phone calls to make yet, but
Thank you.
we'll see.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks, Chad. Robbie?
Well, the middle school finished their school year with going to Valley Fair as our last incentive day. It was that kind of drizzly day all day. It stopped drizzling about 1 o'clock, which was okay. Luckily, our students, we're not back here for the buses to run, so our kids had more opportunity to ride rides. And by that time, the lines were really short and the kids got in. I guess before I was principal here, it rained quite a bit on those days, which was odd. I've never been there on a rainy day, so it was interesting to see how kids handled it. They handled it really well. And it wasn't like downpour, it was just kind of a weird drizzle all day, but went really well. Kids were great. And then the following day, we finished up with some root beer floats and kind of awards in the auditorium, our middle school awards. So the end of the year went really well. Throughout the summer, our teachers are going to be doing quite a bit secondary wise. Our English department met last week and went through a lot of curriculum things, and our core teachers that do our character building curriculum will be meeting this summer and adjusting that as well. So there's going to be a lot of work being done as far as curriculum goes. One last thing is our PE has a bike fleet, and we were able to get a grant last year to update that bike fleet. We have some monies left, so we're hoping to enhance that bike fleet with some more of our bigger bikes for our kids, and to have resources on hand, parts and pieces that if those bikes break down, to use up the rest of the grant before the end of the summer. So that's one piece that we hope to finish out as far as the summer goes. And
Do we have do we
Go
have
ahead.
adaptive bikes?
yes, we do.
Okay.
Yep, Jan has those in the gym.
Oh, she has those in the gym.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, like Chad said, I just want to thank you guys. Middle school had a great school year. Over the last 9 years that I've been here, we've done a lot of changes in the middle school, and they've been definitely student-centered changes, and it's been great for the kids. And we've definitely noticed a change, and all of the extra supports that we have now for kids is amazing. So I want to thank you guys for your support with that, and hope you enjoy your summer as well.
Thank you. Carol?
Yes, in my report, you saw that I sent out some progress on tier 1 and tier 2 on the PBIS, which is our positive behavior intervention and supports, which is a positive approach to discipline. You probably saw we have had a trend the last 3 years of slight improvement. It's good to see because the staff self-evaluate our fidelity of our implementation school-wide, and all staff do that, not just the teachers. And we're at 91% with fidelity, and that's gone up from 85%. And so we like to see that it keeps going up every year. And our preliminary reading data was encouraging to see for sure on Fast Bridge that we did meet our goal and we are increasing our reading scores. And we do attribute that to letters. It is the change of our instruction in the classroom and the students responding to that instruction. And so we're excited to see if that continues to see some more growth in our data over the next few years. And we appreciate that the school board approved that we were way ahead of what the state asked us to do. So we were well prepared, and every time we hire new staff, they get the training immediately. So I appreciate that support, and we definitely are seeing the results of that. In the data also, I shared with you a little bit about the academic progress, and you saw that there were a lot of exits of students. That means that they met their target or their grade level target. And so that's what our goal is with tier 2, is to close those gaps that students have. So that was encouraging. Again, we are very, very fortunate in Melrose to be able to have Title I, ADSES, CIS, all those different letters, Minnesota Reading Corps, Math Corps, all of those different funding sources, which that's where our interventions come from. And so that has made a difference for our students. And in my report too, I gave you a quote from one of the interventionists that she had sent to her supervisor. And she just really commented how she appreciated that the district, it wasn't just to her supervisor, that we have so many resources that definitely meet the needs of our students. And she says it not only meets their reading goals, but also keeps them engaged and motivated in school. And so I wanted to share that with you because you guys do support that and let us build our toolbox of all of the resources that we might need, because different students respond to different programs and different instructional approaches. So that was exciting to hear, and I thank you for that. And then WinRoom, in the elementary, we use our WinRoom for behaviors, and we serviced 50 students this year, went through the WinRoom, and we reached all 3 of our goals. I shared those out with you. What's really exciting is once they meet those behavioral goals, we see that they're meeting their reading and math goals. And that's why we need to address the behavioral goals so that they are engaged in the academics, because then their reading and math go up. And that is one of the goals under there that we did meet, but we did meet all 3 of those goals. And then the other thing is we're planning for next year, and our theme, first grade teachers chose the theme this year. And so it is boots, books, and bright futures. And it's very fitting, especially when our library is getting remodeled. Thank you to the board for that. And we know that it is books, it is literacy that's going to make bright futures for our kids in Melrose. So thank you for that too. And we just have been busy planning this spring and this summer, and we're looking forward to the next year. And we know that we have a lot of communicating to do yet with our parents in August about pickup and drop off and busing and all of that. But we know that we can do that, and also our entrance conferences that will be starting in the elementary, that we will definitely get all of our parents registered for that. And we're looking forward to that to start the year off with great parent involvement. And I too think we had a great year. Thank you for your leadership. And I thank Mr. Winter for his leadership too, and how he has had a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and he has led us well and supported us as administrators. So thank you for that too.
Thank you. Greg.
So far, the projects, you can see there's a lot of work being done out there. It's not like there's been a lot of activity going on. We did have one good catch on our water project. Sean was out there talking to some of the contractors, and just to quickly explain it, where the water pipe comes in on this end of the building, the contract actually stopped short of the building of replacing the water pipe, which in the end kind of made sense. They're just replacing the water pipe as it goes into the building. Unfortunately, where it came into the building, where it comes underground and it goes up, as it comes up out of the ground, that's where we actually had a water leak about 4 years ago, and there's a bracket patch on it. I don't know a lot about construction, but in my experiences, when you put new on old, it never works really well. New on patched really is not going to work well. So between Stephanie and I and Sean, we work with the contractors, work with a local plumbing contractor that the district works with. And that pipe has now been replaced going in there. So it's all new coming into the building. So that went off really well with only having to shut the water down for a short period of time. Handicap restroom, which is right down this hallway, is near completion. It looks very nice and will fit the needs of our handicapped students in the district. The new DCD room in the elementary media has been completely demolished. Rough framing has gone in, and now we're just waiting for the electricians to come in and do all the wiring. And that's also, all those are either on schedule or ahead of schedule. Hopefully it stops raining a little bit so we can continue to be on schedule out in the parking lot. And I do want to take one final opportunity to thank everybody within the school district. We've created a lot of positive and productive programming for our students over the past 8 years. That does not happen without community support. I also want to thank the staff that I've worked with over the years here. Without an engaged and passionate staff, these initiatives would not have occurred. Probably the best group of principals I've ever worked with in my career. We've worked very well together to get these things done. Finally, thanks to the school board members that I've had the privilege to work with since coming on board as a superintendent. Certainly, there are many challenges ahead, as we faced challenges in the past. However, my experiences in this district, I found out with the school board, you guys will make the right decisions for our students as we move forward. So I'm very optimistic about that. So thank you very much. So yeah.
Thank you, Greg. On to non-action items. We have 3 policies tonight that are under their second review and discussion. And for anybody in the audience, Alan, for your sake, when we update policies, the recommendations come from MSBA, and it's standard procedure to look at those 3 times, allow for discussion before we finally make a motion. Okay. It's the second time tonight, so they will not be passed. First policy is 425, staff development and mentoring. Any additions on that?
No changes since first review.
Okay, 610, field trips. Changes there.
No changes since first review.
Okay, 906, community notification of predatory offenders.
No changes since first review.
Okay, if there's no questions from the board, then we will move on to item D on discussion of budget strategies and possible deficit spending.
I've been working with Chair Sanger on this for a couple of weeks, just kind of having a discussion on a few things. In a moment, Stephanie's going to hand out the final revised budget for this year, which will note that there is the possibility of deficit spending. And later on in her proposed fiscal year 26 budget, probably some more deficit spending. You know, we'll kind of see how things go. The reality is the legislature just finished up budget this thick, and it takes quite a while to process through all that. We know some of the highlights. We know some of the highlights of student aid, other funded and non-funded mandates that have gone through, but that budget really has to work its way through the system probably by the end of July before we start really getting pretty definitive information on what's going to happen with the budget. Since I've been here in this time of year, when we take a look at the revised final budget, it always looks like there's a little bit of deficit spending. However, once we get through the audit, we usually have a surplus. I can't tell you what's going to happen next year. Probably a little bit better chance next year of doing some deficit spending. Stephanie and I met, we talked about it today. We are fortunate as a district. We've got a little over $4 million in reserve. If I was to take a guess on June 23rd, 2025, please don't write this down. I would guess we're going to probably deficit spend by about $250,000 next year. $250,000 is a lot of money. I'm not going to say it's not, but with a $4 million reserve, you can weather that for a year or two. I know there are board members. I know there's members of the community that look at these things and say, boy, why aren't they cutting budgets? It's pretty simple. First of all, it's a long process. It's not a process, boy, we're going to deficit spend. So here's the superintendent's recommendations for cutting budgets. You never want to do that. It is a process. And I've talked to Dr. Dingman about it. I have it in the transition document, kind of a footprint of if this board decides next year they want to take a look at, once you get the audit in, you find out where you're at. If you want to start taking a look at cutting budgets, there's a process you can go through with that. The interesting thing about school districts today, School districts already are running really lean right now. I mean, we're a pretty lean, efficient system. The only way you're gonna make any nominal cuts within the budget is with people. And if you start cutting people, you start impacting students directly. And I've kind of made this comment to a couple different people I've talked about, and it is a true life story. Unfortunately, when districts sometimes look at cutting budgets, they start looking at art programs, they start looking at music programs, they start looking at co-curricular activities, all those things which have a phenomenal impact on our students. And always remember this, when you cut a program for a year or two saying, we'll bring it back when times are better, in a year or two, many students have missed out on those opportunities. I'm not an art student, but I can still remember in 7th grade art, learning some pretty important stuff, one of which is paper mache, which our columns are made out of. I could never use that analogy unless I knew what paper mache was. And Ms. Barnes did a great job of helping us understand art and how to do things with your hands and your fingers and all those kind of things. Yes, there is a time where school districts will need to cut budgets. Move cautiously forward with it. Get the impact, get the input from the principals at this table, from the staff within this district, from members of the community, and weigh those things against how long can we deficit spend till we see a light at the end of the tunnel, or it's time to start cutting staff. And when you do that, direct impact on students. I've been fortunate in my 16 years as superintendent, I've never had to cut the budget. However, in the times that I was principal, I went through many budget cutting cycles, and it is tough, very tough. As I've told many people, once you go into that budget cutting cycle, you go into the death spiral. You start cutting the budget, you start losing students because you no longer offer those programs, you lose the revenue, now you're cutting more of the budget. We live in a pretty competitive area along the I-94 corridor, and if the students can't get it here, they may look other places. I'm not saying it's automatic, but something you just have to cautiously move forward with, weighing all the pros and cons of what you have to do. But like I said, I'm not saying there's never a time to cut the budget, absolutely. I hope from what I've read from the leadership at the state, on both sides of the aisle, they know the impact of cutting educational funding, what it has on the districts, what it has on the state, the region, and our country. And it's just something, I think you need to be cognizant of. You're gonna hear some little glimmers of possible deficit spending. That's why we have a budget reserve.
In your time here, have we ever deficit spent by $250,000? So that would be the deepest.
Oh yeah, that would be the only time we've ever deficit spent.
Okay.
We've kind of hovered back and forth a little bit. It's just,
So what level? Like a 6-figure?
no,
No?
up and down, maybe 25,000.
Okay.
Barely a blip on there. And once again, I wouldn't take that as gospel, but just in kind of the numbers that Stephanie and I have been looking at, obviously seeing the biennium forecast for the next biennium coming from the state, where they're going to be anywhere from $4 to $6 billion down. Well, education in the state of Minnesota is the biggest expenditure of the state government. So it's going to hit somewhere, it's going to have an impact somewhere. Just be cautious about that. Start that process as the state comes out with more and more projections. The state has done this before, and all of a sudden the economy turns around a little bit and it's not so bad. That's the nice thing about the state of Minnesota, and I want to speak like a former economics teacher. We're a pretty diversified state where we don't see these wide swings up and down. It goes up and down a little bit. You know, even during the Great Recession of 2009, it went down, but not like other states that went down. And many districts were able to hold tight and hang on to their programming. But yeah, I mean, that would be the biggest I've seen since I've been here, if it is indeed that. And that's a 3-year projection out, which I would even, like I said, I wouldn't even write that down.
So how does funding like for the free and reduced meals like we talked about last year where, because everyone was getting free lunches. That's continuing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Continue.
So what was that impact that had on our funding? Because we estimated that out, that was hitting us at about 250,000 when we ran all the numbers.
It didn't hit us for 250,000
Well, it was that was like the potential impact
Yes.
of, yeah,
if we didn't have it.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but there was still a significant amount that we were not able to collect the data on because.
You're talking about the compensatory funding?
Yeah,
The
so,
state
but so,
did-
so where does that, my question is, where does that money affect where we have to deficit? If we could clean that up, does that help impact, two
No.
totally different
Two,
piles of money?
well, not totally different. Compensatory funding comes from ratios of free and reduced lunch. Well, we don't have free and reduced lunch literally anymore, but the state has put in place a formula by which it still kind of equalizes out. Steph and I were talking, and I talked to Chair Sanger about it. If you had asked me a couple months ago, we would have been $300,000 down on compensatory funding. The state did reinstate that money.
Okay.
So that's there. If they would ever put free and reduced lunch back in place, the only thing that does is creates the mechanism for a more authentic measure of what we'd get for compensatory funding. But I think that in the end, that old phase, that old system is gonna get phased out over a period of time.
So what, because it is all free?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the meantime, though, the money that we would use out of the compensatory funding, though, that wouldn't affect, like, anything we're deficit spending, that wouldn't get cleaned up
No,
there?
no.
Okay. Thank you.
And I don't wanna belabor this topic, but compensatory funding is an old mechanism that was in place for a particular reason. And hopefully they've been able to make adjustments to allow funding for schools with students of poverty better than that system. It was not a very good system.
Feels a bit discriminatory.
I'll just leave it at that, yes.
I guess my 2 cents on it is I can appreciate all of your experience on it and your comments on it. While we are going to be hovering here on this deficit spend, I don't think that we have to jump the shark, so to say, or say that we're gonna go to that nth degree of start cutting staff. I think that that is the easiest way to cut the largest amounts. In the interim or in the meantime, while we're operating, I think it's in everybody's best interest to still think about the dollars, the pennies, the nickels, the dimes that get spent. And so that keeping in mind, as we, you see the checks and wires and transfers every month, you see where we're going and what we're doing, it should be on top of everybody's mind that this is real money and every dollar that we save is a dollar that can go back towards the programming. I just did a little study myself to say, okay, well, I took junior high activities, for example. Where are they all going? Are they going local? Are they going far away? They don't have to go to a conference meet, right? Because they're junior high. And I found it interesting because as we look at the local schools around us, let's just pick on Long Prairie, Grey Eagle, Swanville, or Holdingford. How many times do you think our junior high kids go to those schools this upcoming year?
Very little.
0. How many times are we going to Morris? 5. How many times are we going to West Central area? 6.
Conference schools.
Junior high doesn't matter.
I'm not gonna disagree with that. It's one of those things because, and I'm not saying that's not outdated either, because of old conference standings of how schools function within the conferences. Those schools within the conference always work together, even outside the JV and varsity schedule, to create that camaraderie between schools, to create that level of competition. And I'm not gonna sit here and certainly be disrespectful of Long Prairie, Grey Eagle. There are years they can have good teams, there are years they have bad teams. They're just not schools within our conference, or they're smaller schools that many people feel that they wouldn't have a competitive event or activity against them. But you're right, that is something that you may have to look at down the road.
My point is looking at all of them, that's just one
Yep.
little analogy.
Yep.
All of that should be looked at before we have to say, well, we can't do anything but just cut people. And we can do this now. That's my point.
Yep.
I think we need a better breakdown then of what comes out of what pile, what comes out of what funding source, because it's so diverse. Like, we could say, well, then why'd we do the bathroom? That was something completely different. Community might say, well, what are you doing the parking lot for then if we're gonna deficit spend? Completely different pile of money.
Yep.
So sometimes it's really hard in community perception because that they don't know. I didn't know until I got on the board that what we're doing in the parking lot doesn't even touch what Greg's talking about. Like, so if there's a breakdown that could actually say, these are the different piles of money that exist, right? These are the different banks we take it from within our structure, within our own ecosystem. Here's what comes out of this, here's what comes out of this, here's what comes out of this. And if there's some sort of visual, I know that
Well,
will
you'll
help
see
myself.
it, you'll see those pots of money again tonight.
Perfect, and then that will help us know
Yep.
where we can cut some of the,
And one of the things that comes out of the legislature from time to time in discussion at the legislature, is there a way that districts can interspend those pots of money? And the state's held pretty firm on, no, this is what this money's for, this is what this money's for, and this is what this money's for. So they really regulate which of those pots of monies you have and what you can spend it on. And you can't pull money out of one pots of money and spend it in other places. Yes, it's a very complex process. Many people don't understand it until you get into it. And yes, there are different ways of looking at things, but it's a hard process when it comes down to what's gonna be the impact on the kids. And I know that's what everybody around here at the table looks at. How's this gonna impact the students? Or what can we do that may have the least impact on students in terms of those things? We can take a look at those things as well. I hope it's not as bad as it looks right now. But I think it's always something that's worth the discussion and worth doing some planning forward on.
well, if we're sitting good and we're having the discussion, other schools are having different discussions, obviously not as fun as the one we're having.
They're already
So there's
cutting.
so
Yeah.
there's going to be some
It's-
major conferences.
It's now, what are we
structured
cutting
at
next year?
Yeah, MSBA at their conferences will have some breakout sessions, I'm sure, just on this topic.
Monticello Public Schools, I think have cut 6 years in a row now.
Where?
Monticello. They've got some odd structures in their special ed funding that's caused them some pretty significant cuts, and they don't have a levy on their tax rolls right now. So that really impacts them.
Cutting a CTE teacher.
That's the last teacher they cut. That would be, and I'm not exaggerating, that would be the last one you would cut.
That's a good question.
Okay, any other questions for Greg? Obviously, this is something we'll be discussing frequently in the coming months.
Yeah.
Okay, on to action items. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions on the consent agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
Oh, we already did the motion.
Oh, sorry. All in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Treasurer's report. Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Can I have a second? Second. Okay, Stephanie?
So for the month of May, we're looking right in line with where we have been in the last couple of years as far as the amount of revenue that we've taken in and the amount of expenditures. Our property taxes, we've received both in May and then we get a second payment in June. I wanted to point out from the information that I provide to you guys that the property taxes have not been realized yet. There's an entry that I do in July that actually books them to revenue. Right now, they're just sitting on the balance sheet. There are other journal entries and things that I do when I close the year. So a lot of revenue hasn't been realized yet. And then for the state, we get a 90-10, so there's still 10% of our revenue that we haven't received from them that we won't get until the fall. So that's why the financials maybe look a little weird when you're looking at them if you're not used to. It's just because we don't get our revenue and our expenses are not so closely aligned each month. But we are looking good as far as where we are and where we have been historically. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Any questions or comments on the report? Okay, all in favor of accepting the report?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to donations and gifts. Can I have a motion to accept the gifts and donations?
I so move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, several nice donations here, once again. Any comments on those, Greg?
FFA, great contributions towards that program. Girls Golf had a successful year. They got a nice donation from the Melrose Lions, and it's always nice for the choir to get some additional money for their programming.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the donations?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Becky,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So that motion is carried. Next item, we need to appoint a treasurer since Mark is gone. Do we have any volunteers?
So the people on the table are Joe, Alan, Jason, and Melissa, correct?
Yes.
Has to be one of you.
What is the
What
role?
are the major roles?
It's an ex officio role, essentially. You sign the paper.
There's not a lot of external time needed.
No.
Just a quick 10-second history. Back in the old days, the treasurer would sit down with the business manager before the meeting and go over all the bills and go over all that stuff. That stuff goes out to the full board right now.
Mhm.
So you all get it. But you still, as Chair Sanger said, you still just do need that signature, as we needed last time when we put together a resignation for a temporary treasurer. Should do the call for nominations, see if somebody wants to volunteer or somebody.
Maybe you have to do that.
If no one's interested, I'll take it.
Okay. Anybody else interested?
If someone's willing, they can certainly have it.
And
But
if not, do we need to vote or is it?
By acclamation, Mr. Rosenberger is the treasurer.
Thanks, Joe, for stepping
Thanks,
up.
Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Congratulations.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it, man.
I kind of held out because I want to make sure you didn't.
Oh, hey, I don't wanna go too
Put the
far
letters
into
behind
it.
your name now.
Okay, moving on. Can I have a motion to accept the bread quotation?
So move.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Hopefully you guys have taken a look at the spreadsheet I created over the years, different bids that we got in, what we've accepted. And you can also understand commodity prices went up the last few years, so. Becky was there to assist in opening up the quotes, and you'll see that the recommendation is for Panagold.
I do appreciate the spreadsheet that shows first, second, if there was a second, and then also the history of the year. So thank you for continuing to do that.
Any questions? All in favor?
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carried. Can I have a motion to accept the milk quote?
So move.
Can I have a second? Second.
Same thing, chocolate milk is 75% what the kids drink, in case you didn't know that.
Kayla, did you get the second? It was Alan. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Who was the first on the bread?
I think I was.
Melissa
Yeah.
was.
I just want to say too, that I think it's important that we support our local
Yeah.
um,
I agree with that.
community in that as well, so.
They've done a very good job of serving the district. They not only provide the milk, but they provide the coolers and everything, and they've never been late and always been, we've had adequate milk supply from Stony Creek.
If they were, I forget this rule, if they were not the lowest.
Kind of that 5% range based
Okay.
upon, that's what we kind of developed a long time ago. If they're still within 5% of the quote and they were local, and we've had them
local, okay,
before
okay.
and no issues.
Yeah.
Obviously, that would come to the board.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be the recommendation. We would make that statement that Stony Creek got second, but it was less than 5%, and it's up to the board to make that decision to support local businesses.
They did have the best quote, but
Yes.
I was curious.
It's good to
Because
kinda
we
put out
do, I think everybody on the board kind of feels that way, but yet we were just talking about, watching our pennies, so.
Okay, all in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Can I have a motion to approve the revised 25 budget?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Yes.
So when I look at my revised budget for the end of the year, I take a look at where we were and what our actual expenses are and revenues and any changes that we may have in enrollment or funding. And so this budget is about $200,000 as a deficit. Whereas my previous one, we were pretty flat, about $8,600 as a take to the fund. There is one big glaring difference in this budget that I've now populated the building fund for the abatement bond funding that we did receive. And so that was just over $3 million. And so we will be taking just under $3 million to the fund. And then you'll see in my fiscal year 26 budget that we will be expending the $3 million. So it's goes to the fund and then so it's a revenue in 25 and then it's an expense in 26. But it's its own separate funding, to your point. It doesn't mix with anything else. And so that's why I've shown you on this what the actual total budget will be, which is about 2.6 million as a revenue. But if you take that out, it's about $211,000 as a deficit. 166 of that is in the general fund. And a good portion of that is capital and LTFM, which are their own separate reserved accounts that can only be used on those items. But it is a little bit of a difference. One thing that I did miss a bit was accounting for subs for both our licensed and non-licensed. I didn't take into account enough that a lot of our regular personnel are still getting paid while we're also paying for a substitute. And so there's a little bit of doubling up there. So we had about 195,000 more than I had originally budgeted, which accounts for a lot of the difference between my previous budget and my current budget. Overall, some other expenses and revenues did also change just based on where we are. But that really makes the largest impact on this. I have more accurately accounted for this in my fiscal year 26 budget. That's kind of when I really noticed that I was a bit of a miss when I'm looking at the actuals versus where I was. So I did take that into account. And to Greg's point, nothing is final until we get all the numbers in and we do all of the allocations and such. So we'll just have to wait and see, but this is my best estimate of where I believe we will end the year for this school year.
And a lot of loose ends to be tied up, as Stephanie
Yes.
talked about, and as those board members on here, when we get the final audit in, this is kind of where we've always been at before the final audit, before everything gets cleared up. So once again, can't predict the future unequivocally, but it's kind of where we've been at. And I think once the audit is all said and done, we'll probably be $20,000 up or down from our budget.
This sheet does show you all the different funds that we have, and those funds are all separate. But within the general fund, there's also what we call reserved accounts that can only be used for certain things. Like literacy aid can only be used on certain things. Staff development can only be used on staff development. We have several of those items within.
So these are the different funds, so that's what I was getting at, is like, what can go into, like, what can tap into each fund? Or
Sure.
like, talk to me about debt redemption, what is that?
That is literally we have some current debt that is out there for the 2014 and 2016 referendums that we had. We still owe on those. And so that is our payment on those. So we get funding from the levy. We get funding for that, and then we have to make those payments. So that is what that fund is for. Community education is pretty straightforward. That's our community ed. And then food service can only be used for food service. Custodial is actually our scholarship fund. That's what custodial stands for. We do not own any of the scholarships. We just are the managing agent for them, basically. The money comes in for a scholarship and then we pay it out, but it's not really ours.
So how do we end up in the red on something like that?
It's basically, I'm going to be doing a better job this year getting them aligned, because sometimes we get funds in for a scholarship to pay out next year. So we really shouldn't be showing it as revenue this year. We should really have them in the same year. So I need to
So
do a
it's like a
little work on
crossover.
that.
It's a
Yeah.
timing issue.
So is that
It's a
how,
timing issue, yes,
okay,
yes.
so is that how it happens with debt redemption too? That we look like we owe more than we've borrowed?
We do not get fully funded for what we have to pay back. Right, like there's a certain amount that we can levy for. So that's where the differences are. And then we have potentially interest that is in there, but, so it's not a one-to-one, right? We don't have $1 million that we have to repay and we automatically get $1 million from the levy that year.
So how will we go about finding the details of where we could actually start trimming some fat?
So, I mean, we'd
Like,
have to look at I guess I need a little more information.
Okay, so like when he's saying watch the pennies, pinch them, like trim the fat, right?
Yeah.
Like just to look at like what is dipping into here, what could have been controlled, what was superfluous, what was,
Sure.
you know.
You know, the general fund is where we have most of our instructional expense, our building expense, everything. So it would just be a deeper dive into that fund is generally where you can potentially have opportunities for things like that. Some of our longer term contracts, like maybe our bus providers, or things like that, we can look at, and we do when we renew their contracts. So if you're on, you know, as board members, there are board members that are on the renewal of that contract, and we look at the expense at that time, so.
And deficit spending in LTFM, we'll pay those back in the coming years, right?
Yes, so I just have put together our 10-year plan, and it shows the balance that we have, because we don't use all of it every year. So we did have a reserve for LTFM and capital funds to start the year. What this is showing is that our revenues and expenses for just this year, the expenses are more than the revenues. I believe in both of these, in fact, I know in both of these, we will still have a fund balance after this year. And next year, I believe we will maybe dip into LTFM where we'll go negative just a little. But then we'll have that, then we'll bounce right back from that the next year.
But those don't impact any deficit spending within the general fund.
Right.
Those are fluid funds on their own, as you take a look at these fluid funds on their own that don't necessarily impact the general fund.
Well, the LTFM and the capital reserved accounts are within the general fund. So when you're looking at just the general fund and whether that's going up or down, if we are deficit spending in LTFM or capital, then the general fund would show that.
Sure. The final number would show that, even though it's not,
Even though it's not
we're gonna
a
get that
bad
funding.
thing.
Yeah, next year.
Right, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we received literacy aid last year, and we did not have a media specialist. We did not have the expenses that we could offset with that revenue, right? Or spend that money. So that went to a fund, a reserved account. This year, we are spending those funds. So on that one line item, we are deficit spending and taking out of our fund balance, but that's all we can use those funds for.
Sure.
So it's a good use of those funds. There's a lot of give and take.
Can you, go ahead.
So the money that we have on hand, the 4 million, is that in a general fund or is that broke down into several funds? And does it have to stay?
So the money, it's all of them combined, and if we were to look at the fund balances, which we do, there's a report or a document that I provide when we do the truth in taxation in November that gives a look back on where the fund started, each of them, and where they ended. So that will be provided in November when we do that for this school year. So it'll show you the balances in all the funds. That's basically where you get to your cash.
And does that have to stay in that fund, in that account?
So it's hard to answer that, because if we had an expense that we needed to spend, we can expend that. The cash is not siloed when it's cash. It's just as it's represented in the funds. But if you would continue, like, let's say you would continue to have expenses in your food service fund, and all of a sudden your food service fund would go negative. Eventually, you're going to have to fix that, because the state doesn't want you to overspend in a fund. There are rules about what you can have for deficits.
So we can pay it out of the general fund, but we need to reclaim that money in that fund.
So cash isn't really in a fund,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It looks a little weird when
It
you look
is
at
and
it
it
that
isn't.
way.
It looks
Yeah.
like it is, but it's
Cash is
not.
like cash, right? So there's a cash flow statement that I give you, and that doesn't have anything with funds on it. It's just showing you our cash. And then when you look at the funds, it's like, well, if you were to break out that at that exact moment, then you could see how much of the cash would belong to a fund, but it's a little convoluted. It doesn't really work that way. It's a tough one.
Yeah, no, that kind of answers my question.
Do we ever, with that $4 million, are we secure enough that we can put it into a CD or part of it?
Some of it we do have in, yes. Some of it is invested. There have been times in the past for those members been on the board, especially during the pandemic, we did actually spend a significant portion out of our fund balance for the auditorium project. So that money is there, and as Stephanie talks about, some of that money is there in terms of some of those investments, but there are also regulations when you can pull that money out. We have a $500,000 CD in the Freeport Bank. You know, when it matures, we usually just re-up because we don't need the money, but there is a process by which you could do that to get access to those funds.
But the majority of our funds are invested. All the money that we get from the state goes into our MISLAF account, and that is state approved. And then we also have a MIN trust account, and that is also state approved, and those are all invested. And then we pull funds out of those and put them into our Magnify, which is our checking account, to pay bills. So I transfer funds all the time to try to keep as much of it as possible in a interest-bearing account.
Huge pool of money.
It's just, we're not going to be, dabbling in the stock market or anything like that.
We don't do that.
So it's secured funds, yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the credit card usage? Then
Sure.
who has access to that? Just looking at our monthly expenditures and
Yep.
how many times I see Pizza Ranch or McDonald's or Jimmy John's or Queen Bee's Bar or Shady Sunset Bay.
So most of those charges are the different teams having a meal, and they're funded by their student activity account for that activity. The credit cards, a lot of the admin personnel have credit cards, the principals, the curriculum coordinator, myself, Mr. Winter, the superintendent, Jonathan Ruoff, the activities director, Kelly, the community ed director. Think I covered it. Those are the individuals that have them. Most of the times they are used for some travel if they're having to attend something, or a lot of the times, we also have a student activities card is what we call it, and you basically can check it out at my office, and it usually goes to a coach or an activity. But they can use it for their activity fund, or it can be a district approved expense. We
So
try not to use the credit cards unless we have to. I'm a big proponent of having the vendor invoices come through the office so we have a really good record and it's easily accessible in our system.
So when you have your original revenues.
Yep.
And you showed us that, obviously, most of it comes from the state, some of it comes from tax, property tax.
Yep.
Some of the stuff you've just said is coming out of a different fund, which would be their own athletics fund.
Yes, and the MDE made a change several years ago. And I believe it was just for the overall ownership of the student activities accounts, that they're no longer showed separate, they're rolled into the general fund. So that's why you don't see the specific details of how much the revenues and expenses are out of the student activities account. I can provide that.
Somebody's tracking.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
I
like the
probably
girls swim
asked-
team has their own fund that they're allowed to spend. They do
Yep.
fundraising, that goes in there, and they get a certain
Yep.
amount, I'm assuming. And outside of that, if they have something bigger, they would need to either do more fundraising or,
They don't get any money from the district.
Yeah.
Anything that they have would be fundraised or donated from an outside entity. At the beginning of the year, I provide each coach or whoever is the advisor for that activity with the balance of what they have in their fund. And then throughout the year, I will provide it to them again if they would like it. And then I make sure to give them an update, hopefully by the end of the year, so that they know where they are. We also require that they provide us with what we call a blue slip or a purple slip. And a blue slip is for any expenses, and then that has to get signed by the coach or advisor for that activity and their student treasurer. And then they have an administrator that also has to sign off, whether that be a principal or the activities director. And then the purple slip is for deposits. And so any fundraising money that is coming in, again, has to be signed off by the advisor or coach and their student treasurer. Because it's a big component of student activities that the students be involved in the fund.
As far as individuals that have credit cards that use them, any expenditures they have, they obviously have to keep the receipts. And they have to be signed off by their supervisor. And being at the top of the food chain, my credit card is signed off by Stephanie. So I can't sign my own credit card, sign off on it. So you have that system of fail-safe system in there, making sure that those funds are being expended in a legal manner and in a moral manner within the district.
that's you.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of approving the 25 budget?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
One
Good job,
vote.
Beck.
Your
Wow.
powerful voice, Becky. Okay.
Over that.
Stephanie, one more question.
Sure.
On our monthly expenditure revenue summary, you have another fund number 15.
That's the student activities fund.
That is because it didn't show up on this one. That's why I was asking.
That's what that is.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the proposed 26 budget?
I so move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Stephanie?
Do this again. All right, so this is the budget that I gave you preliminary with a slideshow last month. Basically, at that time, I was noting that we were planning on deficit spending. A good portion of that will be within our capital and LTFM accounts, about $430,000. And again, we can handle that with the surpluses that we have. I believe we will be deficit spending in the fund slightly for LTFM, but we are allowed to do that, and we will be able to recap that within a very short period of time, I think even within a year. It just depends on what we want to continue to do with the new funds that we would get in fiscal year 27. One of my big concerns was the way that the legislature was changing the compensatory funding. As Greg mentioned, they did resolve that for fiscal year 26, and we will be getting the $300,000 difference that was the result of the change. It is a 1-year fix. They are allowing for what they call a hold harmless. And so we will get that money, and then they're forming a committee to try to figure out how to bring it forward to how it will be calculated for fiscal year 27. One of the things that had changed was what was allowed for reporting types for the free and reduced, and could you use paper forms anymore and things like this, and they were trying to eliminate the paper forms. But that's where the big, I don't wanna call it a controversy, but that's where the big changes were happening with the funding. And so they're hoping to resolve that next year for the following year. We did have some ups and downs. When you look at this, you'll see the big negative on the building fund. That was what I was talking about with, we received the $3-some million for the abatement bond funding in this school year 25, and then we are going to spend the majority of it in fiscal year 26. So we will see a big surplus this year and then a deficit next year, but all within that fund, and that should not be a cause for alarm. I was originally predicting about $1 million deficit, and I'm happy to say that we're down to about $432,000. And that is about the amount of the LTFM and capital. Now I am showing a little bit more than that within the general fund. And the majority of that is just when I take a look at everything, just trying to make sure that I get my numbers right. So just little tweaks to compensation and just overall services and things like that.
Very, very conservative projection, thinking about once the legislature gets through with everything, once we get through with everything. This is kind of not too far off where we've been every fall until everything kind of gets worked through. I think you guys now have a pretty good understanding of the process of the development of this budget. And to sit here on June 23rd and tell you where we're gonna be at the end of next year, best guess, best conservative guess. And as Stephanie will do the revised budget and Dr. Dingman will get updates throughout the year to see where we're at with the state, looking at projections down the road, that's where you may start the process of start taking a look at possible cuts for the following year. So very conservative right now.
One of our biggest question marks for this is enrollment, right? We're trying to project, but we don't really know. So we'll be looking at the October 1st counts and then again the December 1st counts to see where we are, because that does impact our funding greatly.
Oh, got it.
Any questions?
You had said this is roughly where you are. You're usually 432,000.
Nope, this is generally where we're at outside that scope of me saying right now, there may be a deficit next year. It's just hard to tell with what the state's gonna do and with what the state's gonna project. Just to give you an example, we've kind of been in this situation before, and all of a sudden the economy gets a little bit better. The state in the second year of the biennium, they say, well, we might raise the fees for student aid.
Yeah, and I get it.
Yep.
That fixes that fixes the revenue side, that
Yep.
doesn't fix the expenditure side.
And like you said, I think you brought up some good points earlier. There's always things that we can take a look at. I've been a superintendent 16 years, whether it's this district or any other district, they've been looking at the stuff every year. Districts run pretty lean. There's always, you're right, there's always, I'll say efficiencies that you can do. And those are things we need to take a look at as a
But
district.
there's also like, where could we possibly be leaving money on the table? You know, not necessarily in a cut, but there has to be areas we're leaving money on the table where we could just get a little bit more. Before we cut something, where can we get a little bit more?
Yep.
Like,
That turns into an account by account search.
I mean, Kelly's a real hero here with community ed, way to go. That's amazing. Can you do more?
Raise deck fees a little more.
Yeah.
Going back to our facilities committee update, that was one of the things we talked about is everybody paying? Because there is a policy that was in place, Becky, I don't know, you maybe remember, a facilities use fee. Is everybody paying it? Are they all paying the same?
No.
Are they paying where the tiered level is? Is the district fundraising,
Well,
is the district?
we kind of left that meeting open with Kelly. I don't think we finished that yet.
Correct.
It needs to
But-
come to another.
Yeah,
But is the
so
district,
that's what I mean. We're leaving money on the table.
is the district subsidizing activities fundraiser? fundraisers. Talk tonight.
I think we had talked to that by and large. I think the district has done a better job of making those adjustments. But as we talked about, I think some more adjustments can be made, but they are at times painful. Those discussions are at sometimes painful.
I mean,
It's gonna be hard conversations.
Yep.
There's no way around that.
Yep.
in the past too, we've had long conversations at the board about, our students paying their activity fees. So of course, we have some that can't afford them, but that are not the question. We want everybody to participate. It's, are we really collecting all of the other ones? I don't think that it's, $100,000 probably, but they're all, like you said, there are places we can look to make sure we're collecting our fees that we should be getting.
Any further comments?
What is the new money this year, Greg, from the 2%?
2.74. It's just the inflation. And I've had this discussion with other people. The student aid next year is probably gonna be mirrored on the CPI index again. State's taking their best guess. You won't get the number from anyone, but they've taken their best guess. And that number will come out, I'm sure, probably by the November projections when they come out. The state will have an idea at that point in time. I'm guessing it's gonna be close to the same thing. Not projecting what the economy is gonna be, but it's probably gonna be pretty close to what it is now.
Okay, all in favor of approving the proposed 26 budget?
Aye. Thanks, board.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carried. Next item, can I have a motion to approve the changes to the student handbooks? Anyone?
I so move.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
I shared out those changes with you, pretty minimal this year. I think we beat the cell phone policy to death, but those changes are reflective in those policies. But certainly the principals are standing here for any comments or questions on changes for next year's student handbook.
I do have a question, and I didn't see it in there, or the parking lot policy, is that in the handbook?
I don't recall. I know it's in the staff handbook. I don't know if it's in the general student handbook.
You mean the parking lot fee and the form?
Form, yep, form
Is
and.
that in the handbook?
I'd have to look.
I think that's kind of been a pretty standalone component.
It's a separate form.
Yeah.
Kids are given those right at the beginning of the year. If they want to park on campus, they're given that, and then
Yep,
it's
that's
reflective
gonna
of the
be
policy.
something I wanna discuss at some point.
I'll make a note on that to have a discussion on that.
July or August?
Yep. I think it'd probably be a pretty good August discussion. I'll make a note to have that on there.
Just so it doesn't start getting handed out before we have that discussion.
And then it needs to be in July.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, 'cause the end of August gets pretty late if we're gonna do it. If
Okay.
you wanna talk about it before the next school year
Okay,
starts.
I'll put it on the July meeting.
Mr. Digman will love to have that conversation with us,
That number right now.
this first meeting.
Okay, any questions on the proposed changes that were in the folder? Okay, all in favor of approving the handbook changes?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Can I have a motion to approve our renewal of membership with schools advocating for fair funding?
So move.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Comments on that, Greg?
I was jotting some stuff down. We're unsafe. We've been part of that organization for a number of years. They've gone through a rebranding a couple of years. Becky's attended a lot of meetings. I've been to a lot of meetings. I think they've been a very good advocate for mostly outstate districts in terms of trying to get essentially equalize funding for all school districts within the state of Minnesota.
Are we getting our $2,600 a year out of it?
I believe so. It's one of those things that collectively, we are advocates, and only collectively can we make an impact. There is another organization similar to SAFE out there. It's our Minnesota Rural Education Association, something similar to it, but with a little bit different spin on it. And there's been a lot of discussions in the past of what we do and what they do. It's just, if smaller districts don't stand up, we get gobbled up by the suburban districts. They get everything. And unless you have a voice at the table, and unless it's a collective voice, that's the only thing that's gonna have an impact on funding, that we get something out of this versus the metro schools gobbling it all up.
They organize superintendents to testify and do a lot of that stuff, so. If anybody ever, they're usually Friday mornings and you can Zoom in and listen, and I often, it's a lot, but I mean, it is very interesting and, yeah, so. I think some districts belong to both of those.
Yeah,
We
they
talked
do.
about it at one
Yeah.
of the meetings, but, yeah. So often representatives will also speak what they're working on and things they're looking for support on, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And if not, all in favor of renewing the membership? Opposed? Motion carried. Next, can I have a motion to renew our membership with MSBA?
So moved.
I'll second.
One district in the state of Minnesota that does not belong to MSBA. Otherwise, they provide a great resource of, as Chair Sanger talked about, in policy review, but a lot of other leadership within the district. And to be real honest with you, as I ride off into the sunset here, if you do not have these advocates at the state level, I can honestly say this in Melrose, and nothing against the suburban schools, they will gobble up every nickel. They have the power, they have the influence. You gotta have groups like MSBA, groups like SAFE, groups like MREA to be those advocates at the table for our districts in outstate Minnesota.
Okay, all in favor of redoing this membership?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, then I need a motion for designation of identified official authority for education identity access management, which would be Mr. Dingman.
I so move.
Second.
You just did this last month and I was it, so now you gotta redo it again because Dr. Dingman will be it. That's the only change.
Okay, all in favor of approving the resolution?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
So that a lot more confidently than I did last time.
Can I have a motion to approve the certification of updated district population?
I so move.
Second.
I did this last summer. Kelly New did it again this summer because our population went up, it had to be recertified. And recertifying this population as stated on there, give us roughly about $3,000 more within our community ed fund, which we certainly will take.
Is this a yearly?
Only if there's significant changes in population.
They do it every year, but if your population doesn't go up, you don't have to recertify.
So it's the district population?
Yes. Yeah, the total population within the district.
Do we, can you share the number that it increased?
It's in here,
I think it's on there.
Yeah.
8596 to 8944.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of approving the certification?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I need a motion to approve the contract for 25, 26, 26, 27, and 27, 28 for the business manager.
I so move.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Marked up contract was within your folder, also with the financials, and there's members of the board here tonight that were on that committee.
Any questions or comments? If not, all in favor of approving the contract?
I,
Opposed? Motion carried. Finally, I need a motion to approve the contract for 25-26 and 26-27 for our curriculum director, Mr. Riller.
I so move.
I'll second.
Same thing, marked up contract is within your folder along with the financials.
Did they
And
ask for 2 years or?
yeah, just 2 years.
Okay.
And members of the board were on that committee that night.
Was he previously 3?
He
Was that
asked,
fine too?
he asked for 3.
He asked for 3, but we kept it to 2.
Oh,
That's
okay.
always been. Well,
Okay.
if no questions on that, all in favor?
I,
Opposed? Motion carried. Before I ask for adjournment, I'd just like to take a few minutes to thank Mr. Winter here for his service in the city of Melrose School District. Been working with him a year and a half approximately. And I will say he's done a great job for everything I've asked him to do. I can't complain. It was nice to finally be in the principal's office when I wasn't having to explain my actions from the previous day. He very good at what he did. And he was a great resource for me learning the backgrounds of school and educational process. So thank you, Mr. Winter.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I did bring some little cheesecake treats over there, if anybody would like to.
I'm still here
Celebrate.
till next Monday. If you have any questions, feel free to contact.
Last meeting.
I like good meetings.
Last meeting.
Is there any big celebratory plans right away?
I'm not a big, I mean, I don't push away recognition, but I don't look for it either.
Hop on a plane though, or?
No, it's a job that I was passionate about and I wanted to do, but as I said last fall, I know some of you were here last fall, it's just time. It's time to move on.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Not too many, I tell you this, not too many superintendents make it to this point anymore.
For sure.
A lot of different things that go on. Well, we have some land up where I grew up, down around with that. Yeah, it's just.
Oh, yeah,
We got some land up there that we're developing, we've got a lot of property.
It's kind of fun for me.
We're
I know
developing property.
I'm not really good at like decorating necessarily, but like that.
Yeah.
He loves her job.
Let me show you.
Yeah, well,
I have mine up. My granddad broke outside blind.
There you go, right?
I will admit, I don't know that I can do this.
You don't.
I think it was Jason.
Do you bet? You have some.
Well, I see the green lights on.
Yeah, I know that.
You ever want to be a part of anything, you let me know.